Mira toddled ahead, grabbing fistfuls of dandelions and weeds, delighted by what others might overlook. "She's picking the wrong flowers," Natalie murmured. "No," Ethan said. "She's picking what she likes. That's different." Leo smiled. "She's got her own algorithm." They stood there, surrounded by sunflowers and soil, history and hope. Natalie looked at Leo. "Are you ever going to tell her? About how she got here? About all this?" Leo watched his daughter laughing, covered in dirt. "When she's old enough," he said, "I'll tell her the truth, but not the version full of regret. I'll tell her that she comes from people who made mistakes and still try to love anyway. And if she asks who gave her the best genes?" Natalie asked. Leo looked at both of them and smiled. "I'll say she got the best one from all of us, because she's more than what we were. She's what we became." Epilogue. Years from now, Mira would walk the same garden path, grown over with new life. She'd carry stories written in blood, in memory, in mistakes forgiven. And when her own child asked where they came from, she would kneel down, point to the roots, and say, "From a wild garden, from love that learned to grow things the hard way, and that made it strong." Leo had always known he was smart. Everyone said so. Gifted, they called it. He was in accelerated programs, could read at a high school level by 9, and spoke like a kid raised by TED Talks and encyclopedias. But there were cracks under the surface. Nights he'd cry without knowing why. A hunger he couldn't name. One day he asked a question he'd carried for years. "Mom, who is my dad?" Natalie paused, mid-folding laundry. "What do you mean?" "I mean my real dad, the one you picked for his DNA." She stiffened. "You've always had everything you need. I've given you." "Not what I asked." There was a long silence. Then, "You had two fathers, Leo. One gave you your genes. The other gave you his heart." Leo tilted his head. "And where's the one with the heart?" "Portland," she said, like she'd been waiting a lifetime to say it. Portland, 2 weeks later. The community garden smelled like tomato vines and fresh mulch. Leo didn't know what he expected. A man in a lab coat, maybe, or someone who looked like a movie dad. But the man planting sunflowers wore old jeans and a faded hoodie, his hands muddy, his face sun-lined but soft. "Ethan?" He turned, brushing dirt off his palms. "Yeah, I think I'm your almost son." Ethan blinked, then smiled. It was a slow, uncertain smile, like an old memory warming up after a long winter. "You must be Leo." They sat in the shade of a makeshift greenhouse. Leo asked questions. Ethan didn't dodge a single one. "Why did she pick someone else's DNA?" "She thought it would give you a better life." "Did it?" "I don't know. Only you can answer that." Leo looked down. "I think I got the genes, but not the story." Ethan handed him a small pot with fresh soil. "Then let's grow a new one." 1 year later, Natalie visited Portland with Leo every few months. She never stayed long, but she watched from a distance, her son planting onions beside the man she once loved, the man whose love she had underestimated. One afternoon, she joined in the garden. Ethan looked up from pruning. "Didn't think I'd see you in the dirt," he said, half smirking. Natalie knelt beside him. "I used to think genes were destiny. I forgot about nurture, about choice." "You didn't forget," Ethan said. "You just chose differently." They worked in silence, the paths between them like compost, broken down but useful for growth. As the sun set, Leo stood between them, holding up a fat, red tomato. "Look," he said, grinning. "Ugly one. Probably the best tasting kind." Ethan and Natalie looked at each other. Maybe love wasn't perfect. Maybe families weren't either. But life had a way of pushing through the cracks, resilient, messy, and undeniably real. Certainly. Focusing on Leo as a young adult, grappling with identity, legacy, and the quiet reconciliation between past and present. Part 4, Rooted Things. Leo turned 18 the day the rains came late. Portland had been dry all summer, but as if the sky had read the calendar, a cool downpour fell just as he stepped out of his high school auditorium, diploma in hand, and a vague ache in his chest. He had done everything right. Valedictorian, early acceptance to Stanford, scholarships, glowing recommendations. Even Natalie, standing off the side with her structured blazer and polite pride, had softened when she looked at him that day. But Leo didn't walk toward her. Not at first. He crossed the lot and found Ethan leaning against an old pickup, holding a sunflower in one hand and a small, tattered envelope in the other. "Don't say it," Leo grinned. "I know it's not just a flower. It's some metaphor." Ethan laughed. "Everything's a metaphor if you let it be." He handed over the envelope. Inside, a handwritten letter. "You are not the product of a single choice. You are the result of love, mistakes, brilliance, fear, and persistence. You are the kind of story genes can't explain. Be proud of that." Leo folded the paper slowly, thoughtfully. "You never hated her?" Ethan hesitated. "I resented her. For a while. But hate's heavy. And she was lost in her own kind of ambition. She says she did it for me." "She did it for herself," Ethan said gently. "But it doesn't mean she didn't love you." Leo nodded. The truth wasn't clean. But it didn't have to be. That night, Natalie stood in the doorway of Leo's room, watching him pack. Books, hoodies, old Polaroids. "Are you nervous?" she asked. "A little," he admitted. "But mostly, I want to start building something that's mine." She approached slowly, as if not to scare the moment away. "I've made a lot of mistakes, Leo. But one thing I know I got right was having you, even if I went about it the wrong way." Leo turned to face her. "I think I understand now. You were trying to make me strong. But I needed love more than I needed strength." She nodded, eyes glistening. "I see that now." He hugged her, briefly but sincerely, and when he left, he carried both her ambition and Ethan's gentleness like twin strands in a double helix. Years later, Leo stood at a university podium, older now, a rising professor in developmental psychology and bioethics. His lecture wasn't about genome editing or test tube perfection. It was about choice, about how family is grown, not manufactured, about how nurture could mend what nature alone could never promise. He quoted both his parents, Natalie with her brilliant mind, Ethan with his open heart. And at the end, he told the story of a boy who was made from good genes, but raised by better values. "My mother gave me a head start in life. My father gave me the finish line worth running toward." The room went silent. Then, thunderous applause. And in the front row sat Ethan and Natalie, side by side, not perfect, not reconciled in traditional sense, but finally understanding that the best thing they ever made was not the decision, not the science, but the son who had grown beyond both of them. Absolutely. Here is an emotionally resonant and thought-provoking ending to Good Genes, tie together all the themes: identity, legacy, forgiveness, and the unpredictable beauty of real life. Leo was 30 when his daughter was born. She came into the world screaming, a tangle of dark curls and wild defiance, as if she already knew she had been born into a story that stretched far beyond DNA. He named her Mira, after the Latin word for wonder, because that's what she was. Not a project, not an outcome, just wonder in its purest form. At the hospital, Natalie arrived late. She was older now, slower. She walked into the room and saw Leo cradling Mira like she was something he couldn't believe was real. "Can I hold her?" she asked. Leo hesitated, then handed Mira over gently. Natalie stared at the child's face. "She has your eyes," she whispered. "No," Leo said softly. "She has her own. I'm just lucky enough to see myself in them." There was a long pause. Then Natalie spoke, her voice fragile. "I used to think I could design the perfect life. But life doesn't want to be perfect. It wants to be lived." Leo nodded. "You taught me that by accident." She chuckled, a tired, tearful sound. "Best mistake I ever made." Later that week, the three of them, Leo, Ethan, and Natalie, walked through Ethan's garden, now wild and sprawling. Not a neat science experiment. A living thing. Imperfect. Thriving. Ethan stood at the kitchen counter, stirring his coffee mechanically, the morning light casting long shadows across the tiles. It had been 3 days since she said it, and the word still echoed in his head like a cruel joke. "I'm trying to get pregnant, but not with your baby." He remembered how calmly she had said it, as if she were talking about picking a new brand of cereal. Natalie had always been composed, unnervingly so, but nothing could prepare him for the storm beneath that composure. "What do you mean, not with my baby?" he had asked, trying to keep his voice steady. She didn't look at him when she answered. "I love you, Ethan, but I need better genes for our child. Stronger genes. You have a kind heart, but you're limited. That it cut deeper than any betrayal ever could." Natalie, a geneticist by profession, had always been obsessed with optimization. From their weekly meal plans to their vacation itineraries, everything was carefully curated for maximum benefit. But this was something else. "You're saying I'm not good enough to father our child?" "No," she said softly. "I'm saying our child deserves the best chance. And that's not going to come from you." The revelation hadn't come with rage or tears, just numbness. Ethan had spent nights wondering what he lacked. Was it his height? His autoimmune disorder? The fact that his father had died of early-onset Alzheimer's? She told him she'd been seeing someone else, a man she worked with, tall, athletic, with a PhD and no family history of illness, a model of evolutionary fitness. "I want a baby that will thrive," she said. "You understand that, don't you?" Ethan did understand, and that made it worse. He had always known she loved ideas more than people. He just hadn't realized until now that she was willing to break people for the sake of those ideas. He hadn't left yet, not because he forgave her, but because he was still trying to comprehend who she had become, or who she had always been. Love had a strange way of making people look better than they were. That night, Ethan sat on the back porch, sipping whiskey in silence. The sky above him stretched out, endless, dark, and indifferent. He wondered what kind of child she would bring into the world. Would the child grow up knowing their father was chosen like a prize-winning bull, selected for symmetry and health? Would Natalie someday tell that child why she had chosen their genetic father over her husband? In the stillness, Ethan made a quiet decision. He would leave, not out of anger, but out of respect for the parts of himself she had dismissed. He may not have been her definition of good genes, but he still believed in love that wasn't transactional, in parenting that wasn't experiment, in worth that didn't need scientific validation. Natalie could chase perfection. Ethan would choose peace. Let me know if you like this story written from Natalie's perspective instead, or revised into a different tone, more dramatic, satirical, or psychological. Certainly. Here's a continuation of the story, Good Genes, picking up from where Ethan decides to leave, focusing on the emotional aftermath, moral reckoning, and what happens next for both Ethan and Natalie. Part 2, Unnatural Selection. Ethan didn't leave in a storm. He packed quietly while Natalie was at work, folded his clothes with the same care he'd once used to fold her handwritten notes. Those sweet, nerdy notes she used to leave in his lunchbox. "Mitochondria may be the powerhouse of the cell, but you're the powerhouse of my heart." That Natalie had vanished somewhere along the way. By the time she returned, he was gone. Just a short note on the dining table. "I loved you fully, even with my limited genes. I hope one day you realize that love is stronger than DNA. E." 6 months later, Natalie sat alone in the sterile glow of her office at the biotech firm. Her desk was cluttered with reports, but her mind wasn't on work. It hadn't been for months. She had gotten pregnant. The man she'd selected, Marcus, had checked all her boxes. Olympian build, Nobel laureate potential, a family tree free of disease, trauma, or addiction. Genetically, he was perfect, but he was also gone. Marcus hadn't stuck around. He never said he would. "You wanted the genes, not the man," he'd said with a shrug before disappearing into some overseas fellowship. Natalie had chosen evolution over emotion, and now she sat in a well-lit lab with a growing child inside her and a hollow space in her heart where Ethan used to be. She hadn't expected to miss him, but she did. His crooked smile, the way he sang while chopping vegetables, his clumsy but warm touch, his useless trivia facts at dinner, and most of all, his gentleness, the kind that can't be measured by genome sequencing or passed down through chromosomes. Her phone buzzed. A notification. A social media update from a mutual friend. Ethan moving to Portland, starting a community garden and mental health group for at-risk teens. A heart of gold, that guy. She stared at the screen, then at her reflection in the dark window. Her face looked tired, not from the pregnancy, but from the choices she had made in pursuit of a perfect future. 2 years later, the boy named Leo was healthy, vibrant, precocious. Natalie's colleagues marveled at his early speech, his stamina, his flawless development. But at night, when the house grew quiet, he would reach for the photo frame on her nightstand, the one with a picture of Natalie and Ethan from years ago, back when life felt less calculated. "Who's that?" Leo asked one night, thumb in his mouth. Natalie hesitated. "That was someone I used to love." He looked at her with wide, curious eyes. Did he love me too? The question struck her like lightning. She could have given him the best genes in the world, but could she give him the best love? The kind Ethan had given freely, despite everything? She didn't answer that night. She only kissed Leo's forehead and sat by his bed long after he'd fallen asleep, the silent weight of her choices pressing down like gravity. Epilogue. In Portland, Ethan had built something real. Not perfect, but real. His garden fed families who couldn't afford groceries. His group gave kids a belief that they were more than their DNA. One day, he got a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside, a picture of a curly-haired toddler with Ethan's dimpled smile, not Marcus's. Ethan stared at it for a long time. On the back, in Natalie's handwriting, it said only, "You were never the weak one." Ethan didn't know what to make of it, but he smiled. Somewhere, in the margins of a painful past, something true had survived. And sometimes, truth was better than perfection. Let me know if you like a third part, e.g., Leo's perspective as a teenager, or if you want this adapted into a screenplay or dramatic monologue. Absolutely. Here's part 3 of Good Genes, told partly from the perspective of Leo, now older and asking deeper questions about his origins, love, and the meaning of family. Part 3, The Inheritance. Leo was 12 when he found the letter in his mother's desk drawer. It wasn't hidden, just buried under a stack of outdated research grants and old photos. A short note yellowing at the edges. "You were never the weak one." It didn't make sense at first, but the picture that came with it, the one of him as a toddler, beaming with a juice-stained grin, was the same one on his mother's nightstand. He'd seen her look at it with the kind of sadness that didn't belong in a happy home.